What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Dricus Du Plessis reveals UFC plans. As this video is being produced, it's not yet known when and who Dricus Du Plessis will fight next, but it's clear the UFC's middleweight champ has some pretty big plans for his next 3 bouts. The South African fighter has yet to be booked for his next scrap, after he took the middleweight belt from Sean Strickland this past January. After Du Plessis won the belt via split decision, he called for a fight with former champ and big-time rival Israel Adesanya, but as noted, it's not clear when the highly anticipated fight will happen. Well, during a recent episode of the CS Du Plessis show, the champ outlined his short-term plans, and they're interesting, to say the least. Namely, DDP has the light heavyweight crown in his sights.
That double champ status, 100%. It's something that but also I'm not somebody that says, okay, now I want to fight for the, it's the smarter thing to do money-wise. I believe beating Adesanya, if Khamzat beats Whittaker, beating Khamzat, that earns you a spot at light heavy. That earns you a spot because then, if you look at it, the greats, the boogeyman, everybody seems to be scared of in Khamzat. I would love that fight. Fighting easy, beating easy. One of the best middleweights to ever do it. And beating Robert Whittaker, one of the other best middleweights to do it. That earns you that spot. But like I said, I have no problem defending my belt a few times before that.
Now, there's no question that if Du Plessis beats Adesanya and then Chimaev or Whittaker, his stock will reach new heights. Does that necessarily mean the UFC will tap him to fight Alex Pereira or whoever is holding the light heavyweight title next? Maybe, especially if DDP records dominant wins. But scoring victories over Adesanya, Chimaev, or Whittaker are some pretty large and dangerous chips that Du Plessis would need to get into place first. Also, if Sean Strickland gets by Paulo Costa at UFC 302, then his calls for another crack at the title are only going to get that much louder. Likewise for his supporters. Belal Muhammad roasts Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards seems to have a lot more respect being thrown his way these days on account of ending Kamaru Usman's reign as welterweight champion and then defeating Colby Covington. But according to rival and future challenger Belal Muhammad, Edwards is ducking fights as a means to cling on to the belt. Recently, it was announced that Muhammad will finally fight Edwards for the welterweight belt at UFC 304, July 27th. It'll mark the second time the two have scrapped, as their 2021 fight was unfortunately declared a no contest, after Belal couldn't continue following eye pokes. Well, more recently, the surging contender spoke with MMA Junkie. While doing so, Belal fired more than a few verbal jabs Edwards' way.
Right, when you look at the guys like Kamaru, who's active champion, he was trying to fight at least once, twice a year. And those are the champions that you respect. Guys like Adesanya, Volkanovski, who looked up the next challenger right away, and after the next fight, they had their other fight booked or they're set, and they always wanted to fight the next best guy. But Leon, he's a coward. His team, they're all afraid, and I think they're all afraid because they know he's not that good, and they know that I'm a terrible matchup for them, and they were trying to delay this as long as possible, even trying to call out other people. And even with those 3 fighters that supposedly got offered the fight, I think it was more so the UFC trying to hype up a guy that doesn't hype up himself. Right? Nobody hears about Leon. Leon doesn't talk. He comes on a podcast once every 3 months, and he whispers. Nobody can understand what he's saying. He looks stupid. He doesn't have confidence. He's awkward. He's weird. And I think I'm going to do everyone a favor on July 27th. After I beat him, we're going to be done. We don't have to hear about him no more.
Belal also took issue with how Edwards fought against Covington, especially since Chaos made more than a few disparaging remarks about the champion and his family ahead of the fight.
Then he threw 50 strikes, less than 100 strikes on Colby Covington, who disrespected him, disrespected his family, and he tried to make it seem like, oh yeah, I was trying to see him backstage. You're going to go follow him backstage to low kick him? We know you're fake. You had a chance in 25 minutes to do anything. You didn't do absolutely nothing.
Clearly, there's no shortage of ill will here. Hopefully, it translates into a solid fight. Up next, Dustin Poirier compares Islam Makhachev and Khabib. Even before Islam Makhachev joined the UFC, he was drawing comparisons to his longtime buddy and training partner Khabib Nurmagomedov. So what does the man who is going to face Makhachev next think of the comparisons? Who also knows what it's like to battle Khabib and his legendary game in the octagon? Well, since you're watching this video, there's a very good chance you know that man is Dustin Poirier, who will challenge Makhachev for the lightweight title at UFC 302. Recently, the renowned lightweight spoke with Shaq MMA, and he was asked about what lessons he can apply from his 2019 loss to Khabib to his upcoming scrap with the champion.
I knew Khabib's dominance with his wrestling, his positional abilities to outposition his opponents, his top game. I knew going into the fight with Khabib that it was a serious threat, but until I felt it, I didn't understand it, and honestly, I still don't understand it. This is the style that gives me the most trouble. I'm more acquainted with it. I'm better prepared to do it again, but this is the style that gives me the most trouble. I have to keep this a fight. If I turn it into a grappling match or a position match, of who's dominating the positions in the round on the ground. It's like quicksand, you know. I might be able to get away here and there, but eventually I'm gonna get put in a position where a wrist is gonna be locked and my weight's gonna be over my shoulder, and I'll be stuck giving up rounds or getting put in a position where I can be submitted.
There's no question Islam is a serious force when it comes to the wrestling and submission parts of MMA, but he's also no slouch on his feet either. Just ask Alexander Volkanovski. And speaking of Khabib, after not seeing much of the legend in recent months, more footage has been shared out of him coaching Islam in his training camp. So you know he's passing along what he's learned from his battle with the Diamond. Now let's take a look at UFC fight updates. UFC 304 has picked up a couple more fights, and since the card is going down in Manchester, England, it's not surprising more European fighters have been booked for the July 27th card. Recently, Marcel Dorf reported that Ireland's Kiefer Crosby will take on England's Sam Patterson in a welterweight contest. In addition, Dorf relayed that Poland's Marcin Prachnio will throw down with Lithuania's Modesta Bukauskas. That fight will be at light heavyweight. Dorf also reported that UFC Vegas 95 on August 10th will include a compelling featherweight fight between the Netherlands' Jarno Arends and Yusuf Zalal from the United States. And at last, but far from least, Dana White recently announced that the UFC is going to hold a press conference with Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler in Dublin, Conor's hometown, on June 3rd. This is going to be nuts. McGregor and Chandler will finally trade punches and kicks on June 29th at UFC 303. Corey Sandhagen praises Sean O'Malley's fighting style. Sean O'Malley has drawn extensive praise over the years for the striking game he possesses, and another man who can say the same is part of that camp. Yes, that man is Corey Sandhagen, who, as he's demonstrated time and time again, knows a thing or two about trying to end someone's consciousness with punches, knees, and kicks. Frankie Edgar is one of the folks who found that out the hard way. Well, recently, Sandhagen spoke with Luke Thomas. When asked to weigh in on what he would need to be mindful of in a scrap with Sugar, the Sandman had plenty of complimentary things to say.
O'Malley does a couple things really good in particular. Like, obviously, he keeps space really well. But one thing that he does, I think, better than most of the guys in the UFC is he does a lot of feinting, but not just like normal feints. He'll like half feint, 3/4 feint. He'll laterally feint, so he'll feint left, right. His ability to like juke and then connect to the floor and punch with his feet, just like if you were doing like a juke move in basketball or something, is really, really unique, and that's something that he does super, super well.
Striking enthusiasts are definitely in for a treat if and when Sandhagen and O'Malley ever fight. One would think it's going to happen sooner or later, right? Even if it ends up being a non-title fight. Both men have considerable tasks ahead of them, however. Sandhagen is booked to fight surging contender Umar Nurmagomedov on August 3rd. O'Malley, meanwhile, isn't officially booked to fight Merab Dvalishvili yet, but the expectation is the grappling and cardio machine is next for the champ. Dana White shuts down Tom Aspinall's request. MMA fans in the United Kingdom recently received good news when the UFC announced the promotion is holding a card in Manchester on July 27th, and that it will feature several stars from England. Case in point, Leon Edwards, Paddy Pimblett, and Tom Aspinall are all scheduled to compete. The bad news is, however, that as is often the case with UFC pay-per-views across the pond, the start time for local fans is brutal. In the case of UFC 304, the card won't even begin until close to midnight, local time, meaning the co-main and main event won't be far removed from breakfast. Well, due to the understandable outcry from UK fans, Aspinall apparently asked the UFC to change it, but as he told the Mac Life, the UFC wasn't having it.
Yeah, I tried to ask the UFC brass, can we change the times? Didn't go down well, mate.
That just got denied right
It
away.
was just like, nope.
Yeah.
There weren't even any negotiation there.
That's a real shame if you live in the UK or the corresponding time zone. Next, let's look at Paige VanZant fires back at the MMA community. Apparently, not everyone is on board with Paige VanZant still fighting, or there are a lot of folks who just don't understand why she still does. Well, recently, the former UFC fighter had a pretty fiery response for those who are still questioning her pugilistic endeavors. Since VanZant exited the UFC in 2020, the former Dancing with the Stars competitor has competed in a couple of bare-knuckle FC bouts. VanZant, who also continues to lock up modeling or acting gigs, lost both fights. So now that VanZant is set to box social influencer and adult model Elle Brooke, questions about Paige's decision to keep fighting continue to make the rounds. That's why she recently told MMA Fighting this.
My entire career, people have been asking me why I'm doing it. And it's because I want to. I do whatever the fuck I want to do. And I do it because I'm good at it. And I do it because this is where I'm going to feel the most success at the end of the day. I like taking risks. I like having fun. And I like to fight.
Fair enough. Now, it'll be interesting to see if Van Zandt can return to the win column. If she loses to Brooke, one would think she might re-examine hanging up the gloves. The MMA community roasts Khabib over his training footage. Khabib posted footage of himself training on Instagram after news broke out recently about him allegedly owing $3 million to the Russian government. Here's what the MMA community had to say to Khabib. Gotta pay those taxes. Dude's gotta pay that $3 million. This is kind of funny considering the timing of this. He's finna do a boxing match to get out of debt. The tax evasion news were so fake that he got back in the gym ASAP and posting training footage, huh? Buddy must be desperate and needs some money. Khabib reveals the fight plan for Islam Makhachev ahead of his fight against Dustin Poirier. In a recent interview, Khabib said, "Many people underestimate Dustin Poirier. I personally fought him, spent 3 rounds and over 10 minutes with him. And I have a good sense of his strengths and weaknesses. We're working hard on these aspects. Dustin Poirier is very experienced. He's been in many battles already. Yes, he has lost, but he has also many victories in the UFC. More than 22 or 23 wins. Using our slang, he's a seasoned warrior. You can't take him lightly. We have a great respect for Dustin, but on June 1st, he is our opponent. We have a clearly developed plan for the fight, and I believe Islam will follow it. I really hope that Islam will finish him off in the 2nd or 3rd round." Top comments. I'm so over Paddy Pimblett. Askren saying Chael shouldn't box after being knocked out by Jake Paul is the dumbest thing I ever heard. Colby Covington didn't accept the fight because he doesn't want to promote Ian Gary. I like the Green versus Paddy fight. Hands down versus chin up. Could be a banger. I think Paddy has his work cut out for him here.